Okay, this morning I'm going to be using we a lot, and sometimes I'm going to be using we to describe this congregation, and I'm also going to be using we to describe the larger Unitarian Universalist denomination. Okay? Hopefully I will be clear about which we I'm using and when, but bear with me. Every religion has a key foundational kind of underlying narrative, an underlying theme that comes up again and again in different forms. And for the Jewish people, there is this underlying theme, a cycle of covenant, and then violation and renewal of covenant. So God says, I choose you as my people, but don't do the thing. And the people say, yay, we've been chosen. And then they do the thing. And then their God gets mad and banishes them, and they are bereft. And eventually their God relents and reestablishes covenant. So it's this narrative of cycle of love, disappointment, and love reconnected. Why am I finding confetti still here? It was exciting last week. That's so for the Buddhists, the underlying theme is that suffering can be reduced and that anybody can do it. What is our underlying foundational Unitarian Universalist narrative? We might want to say that it's a narrative of choosing. That as heretics, we have questioned and chosen. We might like to tell ourselves that our underlying narrative is that the moral arc of the universe is bending towards justice, and that this is our calling to be part of that work. But I've been watching for a while, and I would have to agree with some others that actually we have a foundational narrative of leaving. Ours is a narrative of leaving behind that which was not working. And that's good. We have chosen to be people who question, and we are the people who want to work to love the hell out of this world. But underneath that, we are the people who got up and walked out. Beginning with the Puritans, who got up and left the European churches, left Europe, came over here. They became the Congregationalists, and the Congregationalists became Unitarians and congregation. The Puritans are our denominational ancestors, and they were people who left. We are the people who got up and walked out, which is fine if you're the one doing the walking. And it actually might be just fine by the people who got left behind. But I want you to see that there is a cost to this narrative, all right? And some would say, some have said, that the cost has been, continues to be, our children. We teach our children that choosing is good, that questioning is sacred. And then they get up and leave. Our retention rate is abysmal. Only 12% of people in our denomination were actually raised. So our kids get up and leave, and maybe 12% of them come back. And this is in sharp contrast to our nearest cousins, the Congregationalists. 40% of the people in their congregations were raised there. So they also have that narrative of leaving, but for some reason, their kids come back. We sing our kids out, and they keep going. Ever since we accepted the labels of Unitarian and Universalist, our denominations have grown by being appealing to people who have left other denominations. But this is less and less likely to happen. Polls are showing very clearly that participation in religious groups is dropping rapidly. The largest growing demographic are the people who do not identify with any religion. Okay? Even here in God-fearing Amarillo, attendance is down all across all the denominations. Congregations are shrinking with empty pews, leaking roofs. I think the only ones who are growing are us and some of the mosques. And that's because of immigrants. And there are a lot of reasons for this shift, for this shift away, naturally, starting with some of the oppressive theologies that some religious conservatives maintain, and the same theologies that are now being co-opted by political conservatives to terrifying results. But there is this now growing deep mistrust in religious institutions, and I think for some very good reasons. And then there's just the plain simple fact that younger people aren't attending church because they're just working so many hours, and the notion of trying to haul everybody else to worship on your one day off, and there's soccer practice in the afternoon, I still have to clean the house, and who's going to get the groceries? The idea of trying to get to worship just sounds like one too many things. And what this means is that there are more and more people who are growing up completely unchurched, like not even showing up for Easter and Christmas. I mean, they're just totally unchurched. And perhaps this is good, because this means that fewer people are going to wind up with post-traumatic stress disorder from religious abuse. It's the thing. It also means that fewer people are going to come to us here with any idea of how or why they should even participate in a congregation. Right? What this really means is that there are just going to be fewer people coming to Unitarian Universalist congregations from anywhere else. Maybe this is okay. In their desire to not perpetuate religious abuse, parents are telling their children that they can believe anything or nothing. And it really doesn't matter, as long as they are moral and ethically grounded people. That will be good enough. So this is why we might die as a denomination. And maybe this is natural. All things have their span. But it breaks my heart, because there's a part of me that wants to believe, like Thomas Jefferson, that the Unitarian embrace of reason and justice would mean that in the future all Americans would be Unitarian. Jefferson thought that. This breaks my heart, because I also believe that the universalist ethic of love beyond belief can soften my hardened heart. Also, I'm worried because I realize research is showing that our brains, humans will create religions. It's something we do. Spirituality is an inherent human activity. So if people are taught that institutionalized religion is bad, unchurched people will start to make religions out of other things, like politics or science, right? often with not so very good results, because those are also human activities, but they don't do well when they get stuffed into religion boxes. They can get kind of strange. So my worry is that if congregations like this are no longer here, where will future generations conduct their spiritual journeys? In covenant, in community, to be held accountable by one another. So I want us to know this congregation is doing fine. In fact, we're stronger than a lot of other UU congregations right now. But I want us to also know that our denomination is not doing any better than any of the other mainline religions. So we have some choices. One is to just make no change, just carry on, get our denominational affairs in order, and prepare to die. We staved off extinction once already. When the Unitarians and Universalists, who were these two tiny denominations, they merged in 1961. And so they found stability, a little stronger numbers, but we're closing in on 60 years now, and we have barely managed to grow. We're not shrinking quite as fast as the other denominations. Does that count as growth? No, not really. To not die, Unitarian Universalism will have to grow, actually grow, which this means we have to be willing to make some changes. To be willing to change means holding on to a sense that the future actually matters, and that we have something vital to carry forward into the future. Do we have anything vital? I see it in you. Can you see it? Does the future matter? Can we consider the future worth our being willing to change? That's a question that should just sort of like hit you on all different levels. Okay. So if we're not going to, shrink to a point of, how do we go about growing? Is it just a sheer numbers matter? Well, should we start a marketing campaign to recruit more UUs? We've done that. We've done that from time to time with some really exciting results sometimes. The whole fellowship movement of the 1940s and 50s, one man from the American Unitarian Association crisscrossed this country, and he didn't, like Johnny Appleseed, plant, but he found where the Unitarian impulse was growing, and he watered it and started hundreds of fellowships, including this one. Made sure that they had got their roots tapped in so that they could grow well, and some of them grew and flourished, and some of them, wilted. Maybe we could try that again. But marketing research also shows that it's far more cost effective for an organization to retain members than to always be in search of new members. Okay? So retaining the people who are already here, the next step logically is maybe we could work to keep our children involved rather than singing them away generation after generation after generation. However, some have observed that the needs of the people who come into our tradition are different from the needs of the people who come up in our tradition. Sort of like the difference between first-generation immigrants and their American-born children. Both sets of needs are real, and both sets of needs are of value, and both need to be recognized to be keeping us whole, to allow us to grow well and wise together. Do we so love this way of being religious that we might change to accommodate both. And where do we begin? There are many, many ways to affect change. And some will be sort of the outward technical changes, technical solutions. And some of them are the deeper inward adaptive changes. And it's really easy to make the technical changes. The adaptive changes are harder. Also, if an organization attempts to make technical solutions to adaptive problems, it's going to fail. So, no amount of technical deck chair rearranging will stop an adaptive sinking problem. All right. I like to think that this congregation is brave and strong enough to do both. Because I've seen that you've already done the deep reflection and the commitment to both make the adaptive change of valuing religious education for children, and then the technical solution of actually hiring somebody to build and run a good religious education program. So I know y'all have done this. I think you can do some more. In the past few months, we experimented with having all ages worship at the 11 o'clock service on the fourth Sunday of the month. And some services went pretty well, and some were a little chaotic. After each service, we reflected and we made adjustments based on what we learned, and there were a lot of wiggles and squeaks, and some people were really not quite sure why we were doing this. And I realized that this is because this is what happens when you make a technical change to an adaptive issue, all right? We experimented with a technical change by having the kids come in and stay with us, but we didn't first address the adaptive change, which is deciding that we really want to find a way to keep our kids across the long haul. So today is the fourth Sunday, and we're not going to have our children here because I'd like us to spend a few months having the conversations about the goals of our religious education programming for both adults and children. What is the purpose of it? And as we have these conversations, I'd like us to consider our history and our possible future. What will come of these conversations? I don't know. Perhaps, though, we will begin to adjust some of the underlying narratives, because what might happen if we alter our narratives just to shift them from a worship of leaving and towards a worship of claiming, gathering, inclusion, and proclaiming? What might happen if we were to keep our children just a little bit closer to the center of the action? What might happen if we teach them that to question is holy and to covenant is hard, but to covenant is holy? What if we were to teach our children that they are essential to how we worship, that they are essential to how we will grow well and wise together? This is radical stuff, because it's very easy to operate under the assumption that children, because they are smaller, are people who are less than. They are less articulate. They are less educated. They are less affluent. They are less reasonable. Less than. You know any other groups who were labeled as less than. Have you ever been labeled as less than? How did that feel? Did you want to leave? Please consider how this shapes our perception of value. It's possible that changing the underlying narratives might happen as this congregation does the work of identifying values and mission and intended outcome. But I also believe that much of this work is done in each person's heart. Each person needs to ponder over and over again, why am I choosing this fellowship over and over? And how is this fellowship choosing me? And how am I being changed? What I'm asking you to help me figure out is something that 95% of other UU congregations haven't yet. How to change the retention rate, how to make this a sincerely inclusive congregation, and how to live in your covenant day in and day out, even if it means telling someone you love that you hate split pea soup. I'm only asking this of you because I believe you are one of the most vibrant, vital congregations in our denomination right now. You are doing things that other congregations could barely dream about. And I have seen you are good at welcoming, and you are good at preparing not just for who is here, but for who is coming. Ideally, this place will grow into a community where all ages grow well and wise together in body and in spirit. And ideally, this will be a place that is home for those who have come in and those who have come up. Home for those who are looking to be included and to include. Let this be a place where uncertainty and complexity are held well, and people of all ages are seen as vital, not just to our future, but to our present, our perfect present. May it be so, and blessed be.